Hello, this is Professor Milsom. This is our first lecture on Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. All right, so just a bit of history and background for you. Who was Jane Austen? Born 1775, died 1817, not a very long life, but she wrote 6 major novels about English aristocrats. Aristocrats are people from upper class families. And then her books focus mainly on issues surrounding women, economics, politics, friendships, and marriage. By the way, you should be taking notes. This all could be on a quiz. She became very popular before she died, and she's actually considered now to be one of the most popular novelists in English literature. Probably the only other English writer more famous than her today is Shakespeare, so she's a big deal. Her family published this novel, Northanger Abbey, after she died, but it was the first full novel she wrote for publication. So this is considered her first novel, even though it was published after a lot of her other books. She's famous for her use of irony and satire, which we're going to define here. And her books are basically they're funny. She's making fun of people constantly in them. She's making fun of other people. She's making fun of the communities in which they live. She's making fun of English society as a whole. This is largely why she's still one of the most popular novelists in English literature. She's just very funny, and the criticisms she's making are still very relevant today. I'm giving you a link here. A friend of mine just published a book about Austen's popularity, which is extreme. Think Star Trek conventions, think Comic-Con. That's the kind of popularity she has. Thousands of people gather every year at conventions dressed like people from her time period to reenact scenes and talk about fashion and her books. It's a bit of a cult, I'm not gonna lie. And over here on the left, you see this is a drawing. I think it's one of the only illustrations or paintings of her done during her lifetime, and it's done by her sister Cassandra. Okay, now the book itself. What is Northanger Abbey? Published, what did I say, 1818? Again, after her death, but she completed it by 1803. It was her first major novel. Again, it wasn't published till, why do I have it 2 different ways there? Anyway, it wasn't published until after 1817, after her death. It's a book about a young woman named Catherine Morland. I always spell Morland wrong. I always put an E in it. There's no E there, but sometimes you might see an E in there in my materials because I spell it wrong constantly. Anyway, here she is. This is an illustration from one of the early editions. This is Catherine. She's depicted here reading a book. In particular, it's The Mysteries of Udolpho, which is a Gothic novel by famous Gothic novelist Anne Radcliffe. So Catherine's obsessed with reading novels. And remember, Austen was writing at a time when reading novels was a pretty new thing. The novels had not been invented until the 1700s, basically. And then people started writing them, people started reading them, and the people who were really they were considered for girls, aka not very serious. If you wanted serious literature, you would read epic poetry in Greek and Latin, and girls weren't allowed to really learn much Greek and Latin, so they couldn't even read the serious stuff if they wanted. So they read these novels, and that's the main issue in this book, you'll see. So, and if you think about it, today we still have this stigma when we think about what is serious reading and what is trash. Right now we have ideas about what makes something trashy literature, and people apologize for reading it. And that's the same as it was in 1803. So people who read novels were like trashy. People who wrote them were considered lowbrow or trashy. We're going to talk about that in more detail. But just to remind you, this book itself, Northanger Abbey, is so smart because it's a satire of Gothic Romance novels, but it's also a Gothic Romance novel. What? And you'll see in this book, Austen is known for her use of irony, and this is just, we're going to go into detail about that. It's just throughout the whole book. So it's ironic. It's a satire of Gothic Romance novels, but it's also a Gothic Romance novel. So let's start with terminology. Remember, you're taking notes. What is satire? It's a word you've probably heard. Some people say, this is so satirical. Well, this is what it means. First of all, on the left, you have a picture of satire. This is a character from Greek mythology. Basically, a satire is a creature that parties a lot. There's a lot of wine drinking, so you'd find his picture on like wine jugs. And he has goat features and often an erect penis. That's definitely going on in this image, although I'm not sure what that tail is. But it's a very sexual figure because you're partying and you're drinking wine. And the satire was a character that would often come on stage at the end of a Greek tragedy to provide comic relief. So you've just watched a play where everyone's dead, everyone dies on stage, deep, serious issues. You get a little like like a little comic relief, and you'd have this drunk figure come on stage and perform. Okay, so today, satire is a literary and artistic genre or category. Genre is a really important word that you should know. By the way, I'm writing this down just to remind myself to put it on a quiz. Genre category. The genre, basically, you use laughter as a weapon. You make fun of people, politics, and tradition in order to critique them. Think about like Saturday Night Live or those kinds of comedy shows. They're making fun of politics in order to provide a critique. And you use satire when you're trying to shame the powerful into change. So it's not just making fun of someone, like being a jerk. It's actually got a purpose. You're making fun of someone, often very harshly, in order to shame them, make them change. So some examples. The Boondocks is a great show. If you've never watched it, you should. There's a scene, I've provided a link here. The Boondocks is a satire on the hypocrisy, has an episode where there's a satire on the hypocrisy of the origins of the Iraq War. It's a great scene, very shameful, really. And then here I've given you a link. There's a CBS clip about comedians who do satire to fight. So they interview some comedians about, how they shame politicians and point out their hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is when you say one thing, but do the opposite, like to be deceptive. I'm writing that down, hypocrisy. Okay, so speaking of doing one thing and meaning another, this is something else. Irony. What is it? Irony. I'm sure you hear it all the time. There's the Alanis Morissette song, Isn't It Ironic? Okay, and it's famous because nothing in that song is actually very ironic, which is actually ironic in and of itself. Okay, so irony, basic, simplest definition. This is like my definition. You need to know what irony is in order to understand this book. Irony is when you say one thing in order to mean the opposite. Like you're saying it, but everyone knows what you mean. So for example, let's say it's raining outside and you're like, oh, wow, what a beautiful day. Okay. No one thinks it's a beautiful day. I mean, I kind of like rain, let's be honest, but you're not actually saying it's a beautiful day. You're saying it's a crappy day and everyone's in on it. You're saying it's beautiful in order to say it's really crappy out. It's the opposite. And everyone's in on it. It's not like hypocrisy where you're saying one thing and meaning another, or saying one thing and doing another. It's like on purpose. Another example is you have a ton of homework to do and you feel really stressed out and you go, wow, I really love homework. Okay. You're saying you love homework, but you mean you hate it, which is the opposite. And we all know that. So, a lot of people, you could say this is like sarcasm. Sarcasm often uses irony. Sarcasm usually has like a mean element to it, like a nasty element, but we sort of use these terms interchangeably a lot. So if it helps you to think of sarcasm, that's fine. Here on this image, it's funny. It's a stop sign. It says stop defacing stop signs. So someone has defaced the stop sign in order to make that message, and that's like ironic and funny, because they defaced a stop sign in order to say stop defacing stop signs. Haha. All right. This is another technical thing that comes up a lot, and you should know. There are 3 kinds of irony. The first one and the second one are the most common. The first kind is verbal irony, when you say one thing in order to mean the opposite, like, oh, I love homework. You mean you hate it. Okay, that's verbal. We get it. There's also situational irony. This happens a lot too, when the opposite of what you expect to happen happens. So for instance, this is a silly meme I found online. This guy is like struggling to open his plastic cutter because it's wrapped up in plastic. That's annoying. It's like the situation is ironic. Then the third kind is a technical literary definition. It's dramatic irony, when in a theater or a book or like on movies or TV, when the audience or reader knows something that the characters do not. Okay? So for instance, famous example in Romeo and Juliet, the audience knows that Juliet just took a sleeping potion, right? But Romeo thinks she's actually dead because he sees her and she looks dead. So he kills himself just as she wakes up from the sleeping potion. And then she kills herself because she's so sad that he killed himself. So that's dramatic irony. Like, everyone in the audience is like, no. It's like when you're in the audience and you're going, no, don't do that. Because you know something that the characters don't know. All right? It's slightly different than verbal and situational, but you should know that that's a thing. All right, so back to Northanger Abbey. And by the way, we say Northanger Abbey. Some people say Northanger, but I think it's Northanger. I don't know why. That's just what I was taught. Okay, so Northanger Abbey. What's going on in it? It's a satire of Gothic Romance novels. So it's making fun of Gothic Romance novels and the people who read them. And it's basically posing this question, and this comes up all through the book: is reading Gothic literature dangerous? So we read a Gothic book, right? Castle of Otranto. And books like Castle of Otranto, but like much longer. They started getting really long. And, Castle of Otranto was pretty silly and goofy. Didn't take itself that seriously, like big helmets, crazy mixed up plot. It didn't take itself very seriously, but these books started to take themselves very seriously. Famous one is the one she's reading here, The Mysteries of Udolpho, which is a good one. Another one was called The Monk by Sinclair Lewis, which was about, like, obviously a monk, and there's a lot of stabbing and virgins running around. And people were really into these books. Think like Twilight, but people are like, are these books teaching young women the wrong things? And there's this assumption in there, too, that, like, only young women are reading them. Well, that's just not true. Everyone's reading them. And men are writing them, too. And also, like, are people so gullible that when they read something, they believe it's true? Well, this issue comes up a lot with, like, video games. Do video games make people violent? Does reading about love, mess up how you think about it? So that was a big question, because people are reading novels for the first time as a form of popular literature and entertainment, and they're asking, is it dangerous? Remember, this course overall, we're asking ourselves, why are we entertained by such horrible stuff? So this fits right in with that. And then what else is going on in the book? The book is exposing a lot of irony. Like, you think one thing, but the opposite is actually true. And it turns out that the young girls, or in this case, the young girl, Catherine Morland, young girls are often right. Even though the people in authority are all men and older, and you're trained to think that the older men are always right. But turns out, like, it's ironic. The young girls are often right. Okay? Just keep that in mind. And then the other thing that's ironic in this book is that people who read fluff and chick lit are actually smart readers of people as a result. People think that girl things are dumb and that serious male things are smart. And it's just not true. And this is a theme that we can see today. There's this idea that like, oh, that's girly, that's fluffy. But like serious male things like politics. I mean, look at the US government. It's majority male. We've never had a female president, so presidencies are serious male things. And this is a theme of just being in a patriarchal society. Like, girl things are dumb, male things are smart. And this novel from 1803 is making fun of that and showing that people who, just because you read entertaining, fluffy chick lit doesn't mean you're dumb. And actually, those books might actually make you a little bit smarter about humans than you think. These are really important things to consider as we read this book. Here's some more themes to watch out for. A lot of themes about miscommunication and misunderstanding. Same thing we saw in Castle of Otranto. I already talked about this, the dangers, but also the pleasures of reading. Is it dangerous to read something that's spooky and gothic? Is it also pleasurable? Obviously, otherwise people wouldn't do it. We're going to see a lot about stupidity and obsessions coming about. There's a lot of flirting and unwanted advances. Lots of issues of consent come up in this book. Then there's this issue of fakeness and genuineness. There's a couple characters that are, as students have said, mad fake. And you'll see it, and it's very relevant. And then there's the issue, again, from same as Otranto, this idea of money and inheritance. Like, this is a time period when only the oldest male could inherit the money and the property from the father. So if you don't have any male children, then you don't have anyone to give your property to. Also, if you have too many female children, you have to like pay to get them to marry someone. Like, you have to pay a dowry. So having a lot of girls kind of sucks financially. So these are things that come up during this book. All right, now let's take a look at the book just to get you started. So here we go. This is just copied. I made a PDF of the first couple chapters. Let's go to the beginning here. Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. Advertisement, by the way, back then, that just means warning by the authoress. Okay. This little work was finished in 1803 and intended for immediate publication. It was disposed of to a bookseller. It was sent to a bookseller. It was even advertised, and why the business proceeded no farther, the author has never been able to learn. She's like, I don't know why they didn't publish it. That any bookseller should think it worthwhile to purchase what he did not think it worthwhile to publish seems extraordinary, but with this, neither the author nor the public have any other concern. And then she's like, I wrote this a long time ago. The public are entreated, begged to bear in mind that 13 years have passed since it was finished, and many more since it was begun, and that during that period, places, manners, books, and opinions have undergone considerable changes. So she's like, okay, this was written 13 years ago. It might be a little out of date. And we're reading it many years after that, and it still holds up. All right, here we go. Chapter 1. No one who had seen Catherine Morland in her infancy would have supposed her to be born a heroine. All right, we got a lot there already, right? So if you had seen her when she was born, you would not guess that she's going to be a heroine. Already, this book is talking about books. It's a book about books, right? It's a book about reading. Her situation in life, the character of her mother and of her father and mother, her own person and disposition were all equally against her, meaning equally against her becoming a heroine. Now think back about like the heroines in Otranto. We have Isabella and we have Matilda, and think about what they're supposed to be like. So Catherine who loves books like that, by the way, she's not really born in such a way that she would make a good heroine in a Gothic novel. That's what this is saying. Her father was a clergyman, so he was like a, he was a preacher on Sundays. Her father was a clergyman without being neglected or poor. Okay, so he's a clergyman, but he's not poor or neglected, and he's very respectable, though his name was Richard, and he had never been handsome. So her father was a clergyman, he wasn't poor, and he was respectable. So if you're a good Gothic heroine, you should be poor, and your father should not be respectable. Think about Manfred. So she's being ironic here. She's, the expectation is that a heroine would be poor, have crappy parents. That's not where she's pointing out the opposite. And like someone named Richard should have been handsome. He's not. This is her dad. Her dad also had considerable independence besides 2 good livings. That means he has like 2 incomes coming in, and he has money. And this is a very ironic sense here. He was not in the least addicted to locking up his daughters. Oh, no. Oops, why did I do that? Oh, no. We always want dads who are addicted to locking up your daughters. If you're a good Gothic heroine, your dad should be addicted to locking you up. That's what makes you Gothic. Sorry, there's like construction going on right now in my neighborhood. Okay, so this is ironic. He's not addicted. It's like we want him to be addicted. The author's pointing out what we want out of a Gothic novel. Her mother was a more useful was a woman of useful plain sense. Well, she has good sense. She has a good temper, and what's more remarkable, a good constitution. That means like she's healthy. A good Gothic heroine's mother probably should die. That's what they're saying. Catherine's mother had 3 sons before Catherine was born. Look, no problems with fertility here. Remember all the infertility in the last book? No problems here. She had 3 sons before Catherine was born, and instead of dying and bringing the latter into the world, remember all the dead mothers from Castle of Otranto? Theodore's mother died. Isabella's mother died. Not this woman. Instead of dying, see, she's pointing out our expectation about a dead mother. Instead of dying and bringing the latter into the world, Catherine, as anyone might expect, she still lived to have 6 children more, to see them growing up around her, and to enjoy excellent health herself. So she had 6 more children after she had 4, so she has 10 kids. Remember, in Gothic novels, there's all this stress about infertility, not having enough kids. There's a lot of fertility here. A family of 10 children will always be called a fine family where there are heads and arms and legs enough for the number, meaning like everyone's got 2 arms, 2 legs, and 1 head. Making a joke. But the Morlands had little other right to the word. What word? Fine family. For they were, in general, very plain. They're ugly. Ugly. And Catherine, for many years of her life, as plain as any. Okay, remember, heroines are supposed to be pretty. She's not pretty. She had a thin, awkward figure. So too thin. Sallow skin color, that means kind of yellowish. Without color, dark, lank hair. She has bad hair. And strong features. I don't know what that means. Probably she has like ugly facial features. So much for her person. And not less unpropitious for heroism seemed her mind. Okay, so even her mind does not seem ready for heroism. She's not prepared to be a hero in a book, is what's going on. Why is that? She was fond of all boys' plays. She generally preferred cricket, not merely to cricket's like English baseball. It's played all over the world. I don't understand it. It looks like baseball, but like they wear white suits. Still played. Like India, it's very big too. They greatly preferred cricket, not merely to dolls, but to the more heroic enjoyments of infancy, nursing a dormouse, so she likes animals, feeding a canary bird, or watering a rose bush. Oh, she prefers boys' things to playing with little birds and saving them and watering roses. So she had no taste for a garden. If she gathered flowers at all, it was chiefly for the pleasure of mischief. At least so it was conjectured from her, always preferring those which she was forbidden to take. So she was kind of a tomboy, as we call it. She could never learn or understand anything before she was taught, so she's not very smart. And sometimes not even then, for she was often inattentive and occasionally stupid. Remember I said this was like a theme that comes up. So she's like kind of normal, like boy things. She's not super good in school. And then this is like the next few pages describe growing up. And then she gets to 10. At 15, appearances were mending. She began to curl her hair and long for balls. Balls are like dances. Like instead of going to the club, you go to the ball. That's where you meet your husband. You dance. Her complexion improved. Her features were softened by plumpness and color. Her eyes gained more attention, and her figure grew more consequence. Her love of dirt gave way to an inclination for finery. That means she started to like clothes. Like, if she were around today, she'd probably start her own YouTube channel or something, right? Do makeup tutorials. She grew clean as she grew smart. Oh, she got smarter. And she now had the pleasure of sometimes hearing her father and mother remark on her personal improvement. Catherine grows quite a good-looking girl. She is almost pretty today. Oh, that's some shade right there. Were words which caught her ears now and then, and how welcome the sounds. To look almost pretty is an acquisition of higher delight to a girl who's been looking plain for the first 15 years of her life than a beauty from the cradle can ever receive. So it's like she's been called ugly all her life, so to look almost pretty is better than it would be even to be called pretty if you were always called pretty. Okay? So let's look at these questions, by the way. I give you an example for number 1. I give you the answer. Number 2, if Catherine is not a good Gothic heroine, then what are the characteristics of a good Gothic heroine? Well, if you look at the book, all those characteristics are listed up here. Like her father should be poor, neglected, no one should respect him. He should be very handsome. So all the opposite of what her father and mother are. And the other characteristics, like she should grow up, really caring of animals. She should be really smart in school. And she's just not those things. What was her training? So you got to look at the page. You'll see here, this is it's like a bunch of clips from the stuff she reads. And you can Google what they are. I just want to point out right here, from Gray, many a flower is born to blush unseen and waste its fragrance on the desert air. So this is something she took in while she was reading, and she memorized all these little bits of poetry as training. So this is training her to appreciate things that, often are unseen. You guys all know about that by now. And that's her training, is like reading and memorizing poems and Shakespeare. And why does Mr. Allen have to go to Bath? So you should look up Bath, England. Why did people go there in the 18th and 19th centuries? What sort of place was it? It's actually it's like going to the Jersey Shore or going to the beach. It's what people did for vacation, but it was also a place for healing. They had these like hot springs, and they were nasty actually because there were all these sick people bathing in them, but they had been there since the Roman times when the Romans invaded England. So it was called Bath because you'd literally go there to bathe. But at the time of this book, that was also like a big social spot. It was like going to the Hamptons or going to the shore or wherever you go to like party. So it was like a party. It was like a place with a lot of clubs for young people to go to and dance and meet people. This is all very important because they have a lot of the book takes place in Bath. All right. And then you've got chapter 2, the dangers of a 6 weeks residence in Bath. So she's going to go for vacation with some family friends who don't have kids, and oh boy, it's going to be exciting. All right, I just also wanted to show you there's a Marvel comic version of this book I have a copy of. If you want to borrow it, come to my office. I'll show it to you. It's cool. I just put a few pages from it. Pictures. That's how they dressed back in the early 1800s. One of my professors called it the era of the breast because the dresses were really low cut, so everyone's breasts were showing. You can see here's the first page. No one who had ever met young Catherine Morland would have supposed her born to become a romantic heroine. It says her mother. Oh, here we go. It's true her father was a clergyman, but he was neither poor nor neglected. Furthermore, he was not in the least addicted to locking up his daughters. Oh, for shame. That's a good Gothic hero. Should have a father who locks her up. Her mother was a woman of plain sense and good temper who did not succumb while bringing any of her 10 children into the world, but instead boasted excellent health. Look, she's nice. It's a nice family. They got money. They got nice wallpaper. Catherine herself had been a thin, sallow child who was fond of boys' games and preferred cricket to dolls. I mean, she's like playing here. At 15, she began to curl her hair long for parties. Until 17, she was in training to become a heroine. And look, here she is. She's reading books, curly hair. That was very popular in the period. You had to curl your hair, getting low cut. Many a flower is born to blush unseen. Oh, we know what that is. She's reading some Thomas Gray. And then trifles light as air to the jealous confirmation strong. That comes from Othello, a Shakespeare play. She's learning about jealousy. And so at age 17, found her with a heart that was affectionate and a disposition cheerful and open, manners just removed from the awkwardness of girlhood, and a person that was pleasing and when in good looks pretty. So the book keeps like shade. It's like constant shade. She's always referred to as almost pretty, right? The graphic novel here cuts out some of the lines, but you can still see. Alas, her mind was as ignorant and uninformed as any female of 17. But that was all about to change. Okay, more shade. Anyone who's 17 is like pretty ignorant and uninformed. And then Mr. Allen, the chief landowner in the village of Fullerton, that's where she's from, and a friend of the Morland family, was ordered to Bath for gout treatment. Gout's like when your legs hurt, or not just your legs, but you get swollen and it's very painful. My dad had it, or my uncle had it. I think my dad had it too. And his wife required a companion, so he and his wife are going to go to Bath. Remember, it's like clubs, but it also has these nasty baths. You bathe in them, you drink the hot water. It's nasty. It's supposed to make you better. And they don't have kids. His wife needs a companion. Mr. Allen, I believe we should ask Miss Morland to accompany us. You know that adventures rarely befall a young lady in her own village. So she's excited. There she goes. All right. And I'm going to conclude and encourage you to watch the movies because you'll see all the dresses. You'll see what's going on. It'll really help you understand. And they're going to go to Bath. And we'll talk soon about this book.